Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the hidden mechanics of a company that practically runs the modern internet. We're doing a deep dive into the underlying architecture of Amazon's massive empire. Okay, let's dive right in.
$20 billion. That is Amazon's net profit for just the fourth quarter of 2024. Think about that, $20 billion in a single 90-day window. It's a staggering figure. But what's truly fascinating is what that number reveals about a 30-year strategic bet that Wall Street is only just now fully comprehending.
Because here is the crazy part, the cognitive dissonance of it all. For most of its first 2 decades, Amazon was heavily criticized by investors. It was the tech giant that seemingly couldn't or simply wouldn't make money. One hedge fund manager famously called it a charity being run for the benefit of consumers. And that's because Jeff Bezos consistently absorbed losses, subsidized customers, and essentially treated every single dollar of short-term profit as a failure to invest in long-term growth.
So that brings us to the million-dollar, or I guess billion-dollar question: how exactly did a seemingly unprofitable online bookstore transform into the absolute toll booth of the internet? Well, it requires us to look at a highly unique, nesting doll business model where absolutely nothing is quite what it appears to be on the surface.
Part 1. Books were the Trojan horse.
To really get this, we have to jump all the way back to 1994. The reality? Jeff Bezos never actually cared about books as his endgame. Books were simply the optimal terrain for the battle he wanted to fight. Now, the American Booksellers Association doesn't view Amazon's entry into their market as just creative destruction. They see it as calculated destruction, arguing that Amazon used the publishing industry as a deliberate stepping stone to fuel its massive expansion. Let's look at exactly how they pulled that off.
According to the Authors Guild and independent booksellers, Amazon played hardball. Like, really hardball. In the early days, they famously avoided collecting state sales taxes, which artificially lowered their prices against your local brick-and-mortar stores. They also leaned heavily into predatory pricing, often selling books below cost as loss leaders. Over time, as they controlled more and more of consumer access, this allowed them to extract incredibly harsh, one-sided terms from publishers.
So let's break down this Trojan horse strategy step by step. Step 1. Lure the customers in with an infinite shelf of books in those tax-free, heavily discounted prices. Step 2. Grab the data. Every single transaction generated invaluable data. Habits, preferences, credit cards. Books were basically just a lightweight, easily shippable vehicle used to acquire that data. And finally, step 3, once the logistics network and customer trust were locked in, they used that foundation to subsidize expansion into literally every other product category. You see, books were never the point. The infrastructure was the point.
Which brings us to part 2, building the toll booth.
All right, once that infrastructure was in place, how did they build the toll booths that generate $20 billion a quarter? The secret is entirely in the margin profile. First-party retail, that's Amazon selling things directly to you, brings in massive revenue, but the margins are razor-thin. It is essentially still a loss leader. The real money? That's in the infrastructure. Third-party seller services, Amazon Web Services, and advertising. These are the high-margin toll booths. Retail just exists to get you into the ecosystem, so Amazon can charge rent on all these other services. And the absolute best example of this is AWS. There's this persistent myth out there that AWS was built because Amazon just had spare server space. Yeah, that's not true at all. It was actually born from a concept we can call productizing your own pain. Back in the early 2000s, Amazon's internal software was just a tangled bottleneck. They had to decouple their own servers just to move faster. But once they solved that massive internal headache, a light bulb went off. They realized every other tech company in the world needed that exact same solution, so they packaged it up and sold it to the public.
The scale of AWS today is just mind-blowing. It generated over $100 billion in 2024 with a 37% operating margin. And just look at who relies on them: Netflix, Airbnb, the Wall Street Journal, even the Securities and Exchange Commission. Amazon essentially built a toll booth that its own streaming competitors and even its government regulators literally have to pay to drive through. It's become the invisible infrastructure of the modern internet.
Part 3. The flywheel's friction.
Now, with a flywheel this massive, you are going to get friction. Let's look at the flip side of this incredible scale, specifically how these aggressive tactics impact the independent businesses that actually rely on the platform. Get this, over 60% of all units sold on Amazon are actually from third-party sellers, not Amazon itself. But while these independent sellers do all the heavy lifting of sourcing and creating products, Amazon taxes every single layer of the transaction. Sellers pay a fee to list, a fee for Amazon to handle the shipping, and increasingly, they have to pay for advertising just to show up in the search results.
And Amazon's willingness to crush external rivals? It's heavily documented in our sources. Take the infamous diapers.com war. When Quidsy, the parent company, refused an Amazon buyout offer, Amazon didn't just walk away. They retaliated by slashing their own diaper prices by 30%. Amazon was reportedly willing to bleed $200 million in a single month just to drain Quidsy of its cash. And you know what? It worked. Quidsy was ultimately forced to sell to Amazon.
So you end up with third-party sellers describing a massive squeeze. The materials highlight intense allegations that Amazon uses seller data to identify popular items, creates their own private label knockoffs, and then manipulates search results to favor those Amazon-owned brands. Sellers feel completely trapped in a catch-22. They can't afford to leave the platform because, well, that's where the customers are. But staying means competing against the very algorithm that controls their livelihood.
Part 4. The Antitrust Paradox.
All these aggressive tactics have finally triggered a massive legal showdown with the Federal Trade Commission. To understand it, you have to understand two completely clashing legal philosophies. For decades, U.S. law followed the consumer welfare standard, which basically meant if a company's actions result in low prices for consumers, it's generally not an illegal monopoly. Amazon thrived under that. But now, the FTC is being driven by the new Brandeis movement. This view argues that massive structural power and market consolidation are inherently harmful to the economy, even if you, the consumer, are getting cheap two-day shipping.
FTC Chair Lina Khan argues that Amazon's everything machine requires a totally unprecedented regulatory approach. Why? Well, because Amazon acts as both the marketplace operator and a direct competitor selling goods on that exact same marketplace. From her perspective, it creates a structural conflict of interest that the old consumer welfare rules simply were not built to handle. So the FTC, backed by 17 states, dropped a massive lawsuit seeking structural relief, which means potentially breaking the company up. The core allegations here claim Amazon actively punishes sellers who dare to offer lower prices on competing websites. This effectively forces price parity across the entire internet. They also allege Amazon coerces sellers into using their logistics network just to have a chance at succeeding on the platform.
But it is absolutely crucial to look at the other side. Legal scholars like Richard J. Pierce Jr. push back hard against the FTC's approach. Pierce argues that Amazon actually only holds roughly 6% of the total retail goods market. That is nowhere near traditional monopoly thresholds. He points out that consumers massively benefit from Amazon's low prices and hyper-efficient delivery, suggesting the FTC's entire case fundamentally lacks hard evidence of actual consumer harm.
Which leads us to Part 5, Day 1 or Day 2. So where does the everything machine go from here under current CEO Andy Jassy? 2 letters, AI. Amazon has issued guidance for approximately $100 billion in capital expenditures for 2025 alone, completely outpacing Microsoft and Alphabet. They are desperately trying to repeat that AWS playbook. They want to build the fundamental infrastructure layer for the artificial intelligence era and set up the next great toll booth. But here's the catch. Building the future is incredibly difficult when you are literally the size of a nation-state. Jeff Bezos famously ran the company with a day-one philosophy, always pushing to operate with the agility and urgency of a tiny startup. He warned that day 2 is stasis, decline, and ultimately, death. Today, Amazon has over 1.5 million physical employees, massive bureaucratic overhead, and regulators breathing down their necks all over the globe. Which leaves us with one incredibly provocative question to wrap up this explainer. Will Amazon's staggering $100 billion bet on AI successfully secure its dominance as the indispensable infrastructure of the next decade? Or will the sheer gravity of its massive scale, the ongoing battles with independent sellers, and unprecedented antitrust crackdowns finally force the everything machine into day 2? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. I hope it gave you a clearer window into the true mechanics of modern commerce.